Welcome to Unashamed and Afraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming into Christ for healing, where we share real recovery stories, learn from experts, and share resources that actually work. So join us in being unashamed and unafraid.
James, we're recording right now.
Oh, got it. I'm in. I'm with you.
James, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, man. It's always good to be here.
For those of us joining you for the first time, welcome to Unashamed and Afraid. And so for those of us who roll with us and are part of this movement, are outsiders who are bold, accepted, and unashamed, mad props. Love to have you back and the way you do this movement. So many in this community do a ton in recovery. If you'd like to become an outsider, we invite you to go to unashamedandafraid.com/donate. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Donating helps fund our scholarships, pays for this podcast to happen, and for a lot of different things to help us do in the movement. Can get some merch on there nowadays. Follow us on social media, Unashamed and
We
Afraid.
got some dope shirts on there, man.
If you like James more than me, don't send me an email and say that out loud.
You can send it to
James,
me. I'm good.
And do the thing.
I know you, my peeps.
I know.
I love you back.
James is the one with the fan club. I get it. People I am a very big fan of, we have sitting here in the virtual studio with us, the Therapy Brothers, as they're known on the podcast, but you guys have a lot of different things going on. So Tyler and Brannon, and you guys are actual brothers by blood, correct?
Yeah,
that's right.
Yep, about 15 months apart.
So no
Irish
pose,
twins
this is
almost
real.
there, right?
James and I are only 13 years apart, and actually not brothers. But we like to, so we're posers and like to pretend we are. But we're here with the real thing, the real Therapy Brothers. So, pay you guys into context. If someone lives under a rock, a very large rock, and doesn't know who you guys are individually and together. So, Tyler, start with you. Paint yourself into context for people who don't know you.
You bet. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist up in Logan, Utah. Specialize in mostly, I would say, shame and trauma. We do a whole bunch with recovery, sexual addiction recovery. And I'm also working my own personal recovery myself. And Brannon and I got together because we kind of ended up in the same line of work and decided to start doing a podcast. And the podcast is called Therapy Brothers. And we just have people who are working their own forms of recovery, and any questions that they want to ask, they come on the show and we talk to them. So that's what we do.
Sweet. Brannon, I'll let you speak for you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a therapist, LCSW. I also own a clinic called Therapy Utah. You may know me from the old show, The Betrayed, the Addicted, and the Expert. I was the expert on that show. And then we transitioned over when that all went down, and we don't have to talk about that too much, but we transitioned over into Therapy Brothers, and Tyler's the best co-host ever. So we've been having a good time doing that for a while now. So between podcasting and therapy and managing the clinic, that's how I spend my time.
And if your mother was here and were to give me, if I had mom here, what's mom's name?
Linda.
So if I said, hey, Linda, tell me about your two sons, what would Linda say? So I'm going to come to you. We're going to go back to you, Brannon, first. So I want you to do your mom's voice. And as I'm going to have you roll as your mom, and as your mom, describe Tyler. Ready, go.
Well, Tyler is our favorite child. He always has been. Brannon has never lived up to him. But we're so proud of him. He just does so good. He's going to change the world. And he's just amazing.
Make me want to throw up in my mouth right now, Brannon.
Right, okay, so Tyler, but I'm letting you get revenge here. So Tyler, you are now enrolling as Linda, as mom. Describe your brother to us as she would in her voice.
Brannon is such a special boy. Like he has always been the family mascot. He pulls everybody together. He's the glue. He's always had the best hair in the family. And he just really is sensitive to other people. And he's just an extra special kid.
But Linda, you've got a bit of a deep voice. Let's notch that up in Linda's voice.
I feel like we're sitting at the kitchen table,
Yeah, right?
eating
Yeah,
the leftovers on a weeknight.
Yeah, this is
just chilling
great.
in the Patrick home.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys we were talking before the show. You just came off of your men's retreat, which was right on top of the thing I had to go to. We talked before, Brandon. This is something I personally just want to come to, but I think so. Tell us a little bit about the retreat, but then I want to talk about doing stuff like that in general, and if it's helpful in recovery or not, or doing the go be in the woods for 3 days or the fly somewhere off the grid stuff, the intensive stuff or anything like that. Your guys' thoughts on that, but tell us about the retreat.
Do you want to start, Tyler?
Sure. We run a retreat called the Rising Sun Retreat. We do a men's retreat called the Rising Sun and a women's retreat every year called the Radiant Dawn Retreat. And with the Rising Sun Retreat, what it's really about, I would say most of the guys that come are in some form of recovery, but that's not what it's really about. It's about actually reclaiming your heart, wrestling with God, and stepping into your full masculinity as a man. And we spend about 3.5 days doing a little bit of content with a whole lot of experience geared towards actually just letting men be men, letting them be boys again a little bit too. And we have a really good time with them.
There's a lot of information in that laughter and that smile at the end. I can tell, which I think is a positive and filled with love. And so, Brandon, going back and I guess starting with you, James and I are big proponents of retreats. They were a big part of our recovery. So I'm very a proponent of you can get a year's worth of therapy in 3 days or 5 days doing the thing. But I might just be on an island. Do you think stuff like that works, and why? Why is it helpful in recovery?
I don't I think it's essential. And the reason is because just doing talk therapy, you can't talk your problems out. You can't win this battle using your ego. Your ego's trying to figure this out, and your mind is trying to figure this out. Your soul needs to shift. And the way that your soul shifts is that you have courage enough to step into something experiential, something vulnerable, where you feel something different, and something different on a soul level. And so, it's when you say you can do a year's worth in a weekend, it's so different of work that happens
well said.
in that weekend, that like the guys that just got done with our retreat, they're leaving there with a whole different perspective now of what recovery actually is. How they know how it actually feels. They felt it. They felt that brotherhood together. So it's awesome. We love it.
Yeah, I'll just maybe share an experience with you. I remember the same things. When I was kind of working earlier on in my own process, I went to the John Eldredge retreat over in Colorado. That's the big one that a lot of guys that we know would want to go to. And I had a really deeply moving experience there. And it was really, really powerful being around other guys, having certain content that you had time to process and feel and think about, and then certain kinds of emotions that would roll through. But there was one thing that I felt when I left, and it was that I was with 300 other guys sitting in an auditorium for 8 hours a day, talking about being wild and being free and being passionate and being a lover, but then sitting in an auditorium and listening to other guys talk. And so I came home and I said to Brannon, he had just barely gone to a different retreat that was always so deeply moving for him, but he had the same experience. And I said, we need to take these principles and actually have them be an experience rather than a head knowledge thing. And the way that experience happens is through action. And that creates space for what Brannon and I call an emotionally corrective experience, where it's the glue of the change happens from the inside the heart to go along with the head. And unless you get that heart change, the head doesn't quite ever fully pick it up. And that's really what I think these retreats do, if you pick the right ones.
Yeah, amen. Because I think in fairness that therapy and therapists or books and not all are created equal. So, do your homework, do some things around that. But but definitely agree. James, where do you want to go next? Retreats, go do them. They're dope. What's
Yes.
What's
okay.
next, James?
Next. Retreats are fun and life changing. Great. Let's go with what's your current like therapy like passion topic right now that you just you're just like, this is hitting me again of like, man, this is so essential in recovery, in couples work, in personal growth and development. Like, just kind of do you have one that's kind of striking your hot button right now?
Yeah. I do.
Great,
for sure. So it's, how do I explain this? There is a lack of healthy masculinity in recovery, and that's why so many guys are struggling to rebuild trust in a relationship after betrayal. And a lot of times what they're taught is how to show up weak again, rather than learn how to show up as a masculine man again in a relationship. And
Being
so
taught to show up weak and sober rather than weak and addicted.
full of their shame, full of their, so they're taught how to show up compliant to their wife's demands. They're taught how to show up, trying to please, and not how to show up authentically, and not how to show up in a place where they can hold the pain of their spouse, and still stay honest. And so it's a deeper, more real recovery to be able to say, this is who I truly am, and I'm not just fitting in the box in order to try to rebuild trust with you. So that's kind of been a hot button for me lately.
So
It's healthy masculinity.
So give us a definition. According to you, but a clean definition of what you mean by masculinity, right? Because we have in the media, we have everything from Homer Simpsons to 007
Right.
Cold as Ice, right? So like for you, when you say masculinity, because that's a cultural world, like boundaries or narcissist or codependent, that gets hijacked all over the place. So
It's
base-
totally
yeah, so
misunderstood.
to baseline this, like give us a clean definition of masculinity.
So masculinity is steadiness, is strength, is confidence. You can be humble and confident and steady. Masculinity is about results. It's more logical and rational than it is emotional. But it's like the analogy I always use is the masculine is the rooted tree, and the feminine is the wind. So the feminine is pushing on that tree, and the tree is holding steady and holding to form, regardless of the wind pushing all around it, which then allows the feminine to actually be safe and be more feminine. So I know that's a long definition,
Nope,
but that's what masculinity is. It's that steadiness, that strength, that confidence, so that you can be a lover, so you can fight for your woman's heart.
Tyler, add, edit, delete.
Yeah, I would say to go along with that, I think that, in more practical terms, the pathway to true masculinity is the development of shame resiliency and the cultivation of a true identity, and then the willingness to stand in that true identity, regardless of what my partner or anybody else thinks. And so if I can stand, and this is what's interesting about this, is so many of the men that I work with, if they actually learn to master this, it doesn't mean they're not empathetic. They can be understanding, kind, compassionate, humble, but they stick to their principles and their identity, and then they let themselves be accepted or not as a result of that. And most wives who have been sort of betrayed or whatever, they sometimes don't know it at the beginning because they've been so hurt. But what they're really looking for is that kind of strength in the relationship, and they've never had it. And what Brannon was saying about why he has this passion right now is because I think even we've been in this world long enough to have maybe even been complicit in this without knowing it. But we've associated words like humility and accountability with reinforcement of shame, rather than understanding what humility and accountability really are. And what we teach humility is an acceptance of all of me. It's my weaknesses and my strengths, and a willingness to show up and work on my weaknesses and take accountability for those, while also offering my strengths to whoever I'm with relationship wise. And the way that too many people get taught is humility is cower. Humility is say you're sorry and always be wrong. Accountability is go tell on yourself all the time. That's not what accountability or humility are. Like that's not a masculine way of showing up.
Well, yeah, and I always joke in church culture, particularly, right? Like when people are doing church, I call it the Honda Accord ego. Because I met this guy. You're laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because I met this guy once, and he's like, oh yeah, I just drive a Honda Accord because I'm humble, and I'm like, the humble brag, and I'm like, you literally are choosing to drive a not luxury brand car so you can flex on everyone about how humble you are. I'm like, there's no difference between you and the dude who rolls up to church in his Benz or BMW, who leveraged to the hilt is barely making the payment every month because he just wants everyone to know he's a baller, right? And so I agree with you. I think that humility comes with this passive lascive straight stare down at my shoes, I'm sorry, and 100% agree with that. And so a question I have in this, and I'm just going to leverage this for free therapy for me. I have a lot of narrative in my family of origin of being called arrogant and too much, too big. I'm a big personality. And we don't have a great narrative of masculinity in the world, and I want to give a like asterisks or past, like men have harmed a lot of people with the power they had,
For sure.
so I'm like no, there's a bunch of men that words that I can't say out loud on the podcast, but are totally acting in jerks in their arrogance, abusing power, abusing people. That's real. That's totally real. I'm not saying that there's not men doing that. We don't need to address that. So I'm not minimizing that at all. But with that being the overarching narrative, how do I, as someone in recovery who's full of shame, who is just on this path trying to work recovery, how do I know the difference between in my masculinity confidence, humility as you guys are defining it, versus falling into that arrogance or posing or grandiosity?
I hate to give this answer, but you can just feel it. And like arrogance is not strength. Pride is not like steadiness and strength. And so, when we talk about humility, it also falls on that side of like strength and confidence. It's not just I'm a weakling on this end of the pendulum and I'm a jerk on the other end of the pendulum. Both those guys are like not secure in their masculinity. And the guy who is, you won't feel that from him. You won't feel that arrogance from him. You'll feel that confidence and that strength from him.
I would agree. There's a feeling aspect to that. I also think that there's, I'll share a thought and also maybe just an example of this that I think too is the case. I get with my guys all the time and I'm always talking to them, stand in your strength. And then they go and they like tell their wife off and like, I was standing in my strength. And like, but it's totally from a place of like ego. And what I refer to as they're defending their supposed honor. Like there's still some honor left to defend. Right. Like, and when they're doing that from an ego-based perspective, it's still in a certain way is in the service of themselves. Whereas like real humility comes from an understanding of the truth of the bigger picture. It's acceptance of the truth from somebody else who is giving me those names. There's a higher power that's saying, hey, Tyler, you're a teacher, you're a guide, you're a warrior, you're a healer. And if I don't step into those roles when I'm called those names, I'm putting my candle under the bushel, and I'm called those names for the benefit of other people, for a bigger purpose, a bigger cause than just myself. And I think that's a difference. Is when I'm arrogant, it's in essence give the glory to me, and when I'm humble, I'm going to be the glory of something bigger. I'm going to step into that role. So I hope that makes sense.
I think what you see in that, like that masculinity or that confident place, is a man who is rigorously honest, just honest about who he is,
Mm-hmm.
but also so kind and so empathetic at the same time. So powerful enough to speak his truth, even if it goes in conflict of others, but still caring enough to know that I'm strong enough within myself that someone else can have a different opinion or think something different, and I'm not going to take that personally. So much so that I can actually care about their opinion and how they feel and who they are, but I can still stand in my truth and be healthily boundaried and those type of things. So it's a combination of that honesty and that empathy that you really feel that strength from a man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like being like Jesus, right? It's like hard to get to that place.
Whoa! Don't complicate this with the facts, and don't make it simple. So we have to do something about it. Take it easy, guys. Take it easy.
So Tyler, your topic that you're kind of like you're focused on, or that you're just kind of feeling passionate about right now in your work.
Yeah, there's two things. One of them is the one we just talked about. I feel actually like I've been called by God to be a leader of men and to help
Mhm.
men understand their true masculinity. So that's always been a passion, and I really have a particular passion right now for really get fired up when I see a man living below what I call his means, where he's playing small and he gets controlling and manipulative and all the things that go along with a good healthy addiction, but
you should see Tyler. He gets pissed
Brandon
off.
has to calm.
Like, he's
Brandon
just
always
like-
has to calm me down with our collars.
He's ready to just go after these guys. Like, I'm like, all right.
There's so many times I
want
want to reach through the screen and just shake the dude and be like, "Dude, do you see who you are?" Like, so I don't do that because Brandon stops me. So the other thing that I really have a lot of a passion about right now is actually understanding the interplay between shame and trauma, and how that becomes the catalyst for actual understanding of the truth of who I am. The healing from shame and trauma actually produces the best outcomes in the world for people who are willing to follow the path of what it takes to do that. And so we spend a lot of time on shame, understanding trauma, and then learning to uncover and peel back the onion from those life experiences to find those new names that we get from a higher power that say, now that you've experienced this, I see you as this blank teacher, guide, healer, warrior, whatever it is. And so we spend a lot of time on what I call the principles of wholehearted living as a result of the experiences that we have.
Yeah. I mean, so we're unashamed here. So we believe in getting unashamed. We're on board with you with that message. So just kind of in a brief, and to give us in a few minutes, like, what's that process, or what's that connection between the link between trauma, shame, and just what are some things that, if we got listeners out here looking to become unashamed, recognizing that in my addiction and in my shame, it's keeping me stuck. And wait, my trauma's tied to that? Tell me how that works. Why does my trauma? So either, just kind of like, how do we get unashamed in that? What's a good way to move through some of that? Just give us a high level even.
All right. Yeah, we use an analogy called the trauma tree, and we'll start from the top, and the top is the fruits. And we have our clients start looking at the fruits of their own lives and say, what are the outcomes that I'm getting right now that I do and I don't like? And a lot of times they're getting a lot of negative outcomes. I feel disconnected. I feel fake. I feel like a hypocrite. I feel weak. My body's breaking down. I don't sleep well, whatever. The outcomes are actually directly influenced by then what we call the leaves and the branches. And the leaves and the branches are the ways that we show up as posers. We actually show up as ways that we think the world wants us to show up. And then it produces the outcomes that we don't like. And then we can't figure out why that's not happening. But below the leaves and the branches, there's the trunk. And the trunk is the actual set of core beliefs that I've adopted over time, sometimes without even knowing that I did it, that teach me the rules for living, the rules of engagement, the rules of life.
Systems.
So as being the oldest brother and coming from the home that I did, I just by that nature of being in that position, I incurred this idea that I had to be a good example and I had to be perfect and I had to live up to all these expectations and I had to never let Brannon down or my dad down or anybody else. And that belief system led to the masks or the posers, and then that led to the outcomes. And below all of that is the roots. And the roots are the life experiences that change us emotionally. That's what trauma is. So when I have something traumatic happen, there's this crossroads where my organism, my body and my brain have to make sense of it. And if I don't have the resources at the time, then it funnels into a belief about myself or others or the world that might in the moment be adaptive, but later on becomes maladaptive. And so I have to go make peace with the things that have happened, how that influenced my beliefs, how that's led to me showing up, and what the outcomes are. And then I have to go and actually start to have an emotionally corrective experience with some of those things to start reforming and reshaping the core beliefs that I've been living with.
Awesome. Thank
Love
you.
that.
Yeah.
Brandon, add, edit, delete.
Yeah, I mean, to simplify it, I love how Tyler just outlined all of that. To simplify it, you need to get conscious, and then you need to bring it up into the light and find out that when I bring it up into the light, I'm still loved. And because all shame is fear of abandonment or rejection. And so we have all this trauma that's taught us like I'm not lovable, I'm not okay. And so shame is an emotion that you have to practice opposite action on in order to get rid of the shame. And so if you do what the shame tells you to do, you're going to continue to feed the shame.
Mm-hmm.
And shame will tell you to run and hide.
Yep.
But if you turn and face it and you turn and deal with it and you have people around you that love you, even in your mess, it's like, holy crap, like I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I wasn't okay. What the heck? Like I thought I wasn't lovable, but like all these people love me more because I'm being vulnerable. That's the healing process.
I could maybe give an example of that. I was into my recovery, but pretty early, and I was running my own clinic, and I was doing a women's group. And I got home from group one night, and my wife started talking to me about what had happened, how I was doing. She said, "Do you ever tell any of your clients your own personal story, Tyler?" And I was like, "No, I've never told any of my clients that I'm in recovery." And my wife looked at me and she said, "Why not? Like your story is gold. Like you should tell your story." And I was like, okay, well, so I've sat on it for a week. And the very next week in that same women's group, I kind of said, all right, guys, we're going to do something a little different today. I just want you to hear me out. And then I told them my whole story. And it was like dead silent at the end of that group. And I left, I got in the car and I was shaking and I actually started crying. And I called my wife and I said, I think I just ruined my whole career. I'm afraid I just ruined my whole career. Like, and she's like, no, I don't think so, And then the week after that, I came back to group and I said, it was a full group. Everyone was still there. And I said, how did last week go for you? And out of the 12 women that were there, 2 of them were furious with me. They had felt their own sense of betrayal, their own sense of struggle. The other 10 of them were like, that's the best group I've ever been to. Like, I trust you more now. You know what you're doing. I'm all in. Like, thank you for sharing. And that's what Brannon's talking about, is like something shifted in me. And I was like, I no longer have a secret. I have a story. And that story, the hell that we go through with our stories, we have to do something to make them matter. And so if we sit on our stories and we hide them, then we don't get to use all the experience we get from them to help people. And that's the shift. And then there's an emotionally corrective experience where all of a sudden I walk out of that going, oh, wow, like I didn't get rejected. Like, in fact, it was more than rejection.
That's the power
It was
of unashamed, unafraid right there.
That's it.
Yep.
Well, and that's where I'd say
Yeah.
that's our experience all the time, because we have moments where we get together and record. And when I'm in my shame or I haven't dropped into the experience, I'll say to people before the show, I'm like, someone's like, oh, we're recording a story. And I'm like, let me guess. They were raised in a house with a judgmental God. They saw porn as a kid, couldn't blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
Here's the 5 things they did in recovery, blah, 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 blah.
Heard
I'm
it
like, this is the same thing I've heard 1,000 times, right? And I'm always so impressed or I've thought that I'm like, unashamed, like we're going to cap at like 150 episodes because we're kind of going to get like the 6 different versions of the stories, 6 different, and then we're kind of done. That's it, right? And it's always interesting to me how individual stories are so impactful. And it's always interesting to me connecting with some of our outsiders and listeners that someone will share a story on the show that for me in my shame scripts, it didn't totally resonate with me 10 out of 10. So I'm like, oh wow, that's a great story, that's a great episode, but I'm like, whatever. And then I'll go talk to someone and they're like, dude, that episode's the best one you ever did, it
Best
changed
one
my
you've ever
life.
done.
And I'm like, really? I'm like, I thought it was like B plus, but whatever, and then ones that for me that I'm like, guys, this was the best episode we ever did, and a couple guys are like, okay, Steve, whatever. Like, because when you make meaning of that story, right, like everyone's story matter and has purpose. And so as you bring up the women, to both of you, the question I want to ask is like, so if I'm a partner listening, right,
Mhm.
what can I do as a partner to show up well, to show up as a resource, not a blockade, to helping my partner find their masculinity, in doing their trauma work and their shame work and land into this? Like, what can I do to show up well?
So a couple things, and this is, I'm going to say this, but this oftentimes is not the knee-jerk reaction to how you want to show up to your partner who's just betrayed you. Okay, so it's okay to like
Hate this idea.
want to be mad, yeah, and it's okay to want to hover and control and figure out what he's doing and all of that stuff. That's a normal part of the process of healing. But as you get through that, you work through some of that stuff. For the partner, the healthier they can be, the more it will support their partner in recovery. So again, the more they're healthy with their boundaries, they have their own self-care going, their okayness isn't all dependent upon the relationship, then they can healthily disconnect from him and allow him to be self-determined in his own recovery, and watch and see if he's going to work it or not. And then like connect with him on it. How are things going, or this or that? But she's strong enough unto herself that she isn't pushing it and driving it and hovering over all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, love that. Tyler?
Yeah, that would, again, I just want to reiterate what Brannon said, that to me, there's like a pattern that gets followed a lot of the times where there's like your world gets blown apart and you spend the first bit of recovery just trying to get your feet planted again. And you got to learn how to cope emotionally, and you got to try to make sense of things that don't make sense. And then after you step through that, then the journey that Brannon's talking about it's all about personal authenticity. It's understanding, same thing we would teach the men to do on their side of things. It's the same thing with women. And the truth is that there's a massive trauma that's in the place there. And that trauma is right at the beginning of the process, but eventually that trauma is going to mold and shape you in some way. And if you'll let it, it will do it for the better. But it's going and wrestling with those things, wrestling with the process of forgiveness, wrestling with the process of feeling like you're in crisis all the time, wrestling with trust. But that's what Brennan's getting at is that you'll never get trust if you're the one dictating and driving the recovery. The only way trust happens is when you're able to do your own work for your own sake, to keep yourself planted emotionally, and to watch him step into the role that you've always wanted him to step into. And that's how trust actually gets reestablished.
Yeah, love that.
Can I add one thing?
No. It has to be at least 2. I mean, we really care about our listeners, and you got a lot of gold. So I think it's a little selfish of you to do one thing. Like,
okay,
come on,
I'll
we're
come
not
up with
profit,
another.
bro. Hook them up.
Thank you. Well, and this might be one that's really hard to hear. Is someone just betrayed you, or they've been hiding and lying for years. And this goes for both sides of the coin, by the way. To have positive regard for your partner, that they are a good soul, they're a good human being. Maybe they've done some things. Maybe it's a cry for help. But if you just look at them as an unlovable, terrible person, they're probably already feeling that way themselves. Now, just because you have positive regard doesn't mean you're having sex with them all the time,
or being boundaryless, or
no boundaries, or
for sure.
Right. You can still see the good. Like every client that walks in our offices, they can say all the stuff they've ever done, and it's like, I can still see your goodness. I know you're a good soul. And I think it's important to remember that for a couple, and that can be really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
was taught something early on in my own recovery, and it's kind of stuck with me. And it's when you're in a marriage, and I'd ask your listeners to try this on for size, even though it might not be fun to hear either. But to always see your partner that everything they do is either one of two things. It's either an act of love or it's a cry for help. And
Mm-hmm.
and if you actually only could see your partner in either one of those lights, ask what the outcomes in your life would be that might be different than how it's happening
Mm-hmm.
right now. Now, it's easy for me to say that. I know it's harder to follow through on it when you're human and you're dealing with your own emotions. But even your response back to your husband could be seen as either an act of love or a cry for help as well. And if both of you
Yeah.
saw one another in that light, that's going to draw you together to support one another sooner than not.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. So, uh, amen on the double. So, one thing I want to leverage out of you guys, because I think this is one of the most difficult things about people's recovery that they don't talk about, is finding the right resources and doing it well. Most recovery stories that I hear have some sentiment, depending on how it went for them, of I've been in recovery for 10 years, 5 years, 7 years, 20 years. And if they're being a little bit more PC or kind, they'll say, I did this resource, this therapy, this book, this church thing, this whatever. And I learned some stuff from it and it was helpful, which is a kind way of saying it didn't get me where I needed to go. Right. Or they're angry or pissed or hurt or feel betrayed. And they're like, yeah, I went and this therapist was full of crap and it was a waste of time and money. Right. Or what? So anywhere in between in that gray, having met a lot of people and a lot of different things, and also leaving space and owning different things work for different people. I've had people come to Warrior Heart, and I'm sure I can find someone who's been to your guys' retreat that was like, it's all right. And I won't be like, what the hell's wrong with you? It's all right. Are you kidding me? Like, were you in the same room I was in? What's your problem? Right. And like stuff that has worked. So like I own a lot on the show and name a lot. Like I'm not a big 12-step person. 12-step was not a big part of my recovery. For other people, it was massively impactful and helpful. For me, I'm in the it's all right. And the 12-steppers look at me like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. So I get that there's different things for different people. So people are on the scale of where they're at with resources that have worked or not worked. So I'm saying that out loud on the front of this question. Also, different things work for different people. Also saying that in front of this question. And I think there's ways to really find what works. So I want to know for you guys, how do I, as a person in recovery, find the stuff that actually moves the needle and actually works for me? So I'm not wasting time, money, and emotional capital doing stuff that's like, how do I actually do that?
Go ahead, Tyler.
So I would say that you want to, when you're doing your research, you want to see what the actual primary focus is of whatever treatment you're going to be doing. And for me personally, again, this is different for everybody, but by and large, and what I see in my practice is you want to go to a place that's not going to have sobriety be at the primary focus. Sobriety is an important part of recovery, but what's really important is actually doing the deep soul work of we're dealing with shame, we're dealing with trauma, we're dealing with some of the deeper issues, and a program that will actually dive deep with some direction on, hey, we've got to go there. Because too many therapists are out there, they're so afraid to lose a client that they won't shoot straight and they won't push into the depths. And so you want to find a program or a therapist that does understand the problem you're going through, but also is willing to go to those depths with you and maybe even push you into the depths a little bit. And I'm talking shame and trauma work specifically.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing as Tyler. You're looking for expertise that they actually you need specialized help with this. You can't just go to anybody. So you do need some expertise, but you also need a therapist that's going to be honest and push you and be willing to hold that space and do that with you. The art of therapy of building enough rapport with you and safety so that they can like give it to you a little bit. That's is really helpful. And then the thing I would add is it's really good to see community around the help that you're getting. If they have a good group system going, or they have clients who have been really successful, clients who have gone to retreats or whatever it is, there's community there. And that's really important for the recovery process. So if you're going somewhere where they don't have anybody who really is working it or anybody around, then that's probably not a great fit.
So
And,
a how-to
yeah.
on that, and I'll get back to you, is would it be inappropriate for me to ask, like, do you have any testimonials or former clients I could talk to, or people in your program who can speak to this work, to this, what you specialize or focus on, or what happens at that retreat? Or
See, Tyler and I would welcome that question. Because heck yeah,
We'll
we
give out
do.
phone numbers.
Now,
We'll send you to the website
it-
with video after video of people saying those things.
what
like,
their experience was. Yeah.
Yeah, if you asked that question and it wasn't okay and it was awkward, and you're probably in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is
And you
true
should ask that
outside of
question.
just therapy, right? Right, because that could be a
Yeah.
retreat, that could be whatever.
Yeah, and it's
So,
fair to ask that question. That's a good question to ask when you're looking at a program.
Now, I gotta say, like, sometimes, because I hire and train therapists, sometimes, who you can get in with is who you can get in with. Now, hopefully,
Mhm.
they're being supervised and trained by somebody who has built out a community like that and who is an expert. And so you're still getting that, but secondhand
Mhm.
from a good young therapist or whoever. And that's good. That's great.
Well,
You can get really good help.
right, and that's my budget life hack, because people are like, I don't always
Yeah.
want the new therapist, and I said, no, because you might have LeBron James right before he gets drafted.
That's right.
So like,
Totally.
there's some
That's right.
people,
And they're out there.
right? They're out there. I'm like, there's some people who got really cheap therapy from me that, to be honest, they caught me in a
Yeah.
really great window, right? Like,
Yeah.
because, and so I think to that, like, it's not always bad, right? Like, I know some of the young therapists at Therapy Utah, they're
Mhm.
good. Like, they're
Yeah.
like, you're catching them on the cut. To me, that's a budget and a grab. So love that. Other ways, other things I should do to navigate what resources I'm using. Like, how else can I litmus test? Like, so the other one I was like, how do I know if it's working? So, okay, I sat down with you or the yoga teacher or the church group or whatever, and I said, tell me this works. And they said, and I got the warm and fuzzies. I said, can I talk to 3 people who've done it? And they say, sure. And I see the video testimonials or the phone numbers, and I do the thing. Now that I'm doing the thing, like, how do I know if the needle's actually moving?
There's some platforms and things out there, and even programs that are not about like love and positive regard. They're about tearing people apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the people that resonate in those places actually will stay in groups for a long time and stay in a victim stance for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and not get better.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not happier. Their relationships aren't better. The outcomes of their work is not better. And so if you get a sense of a grovel going on, or just a complain fest, it's probably not a good place to actually move forward. And you might like that at first because it's like, whoa, validation for all my pain.
Mhm.
Like, this feels good.
Yeah.
I like the validation. But you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money getting worse, actually, in programs like that.
So what you guys just saw was Brannon's version of some of those programs. They're all right. Like,
Right.
there's
Right, exactly.
he did a really good
They're-
job of actually toning himself
They're
down,
not-
because
they're
he
not
has,
I.
he has
They're
some
damaging,
pretty
yeah.
he has some pretty strong
Yes.
feelings about a couple of those really popular platforms that are out there. But I think what he's getting at is the right thing is, when you're asking that question, you also need to go into it knowing what you want your outcomes to be and what your values are. Because if you can speak values and outcomes with the program, then when you find that those things align, then that's where you want to be. Because a lot of places won't have similar values. And the example that I'm going to give that Brannon didn't is that there's some programs, especially for betrayed spouses, that
Mhm.
they do a really good job of upfront producing the empathy and the understanding, but they don't help them move past the anger part and the frustration part into the actual healing and forgiveness eventually.
Yep.
And in the meantime, they make a ton of money on it, but they keep them stuck. And there's a time and a place for that. That's a process that has to be moved through. But if your value system says, I'm here to try to figure out how to heal myself, get through this bitterness and this frustration that I feel, and come out on the other side with some kind of a heart at peace and some forgiveness, then I need to make sure that there's a pathway that leads me there with the program that I'm choosing.
Well, yeah, I love that. And
Amen.
and I think the read between the lines I'm going to say about everything you guys just said is notice that the therapy brothers, who are the real freaking deal, never said, ask everyone else. And if they say it's good, believe them. Right. Everything you guys said came from the
Yes.
lens of me trusting myself. Cause like I've had, as a therapist, I've had clients ask me stuff and I'm like, oh, friend, you don't want to give me that power. So I know you're willing to. Don't like don't. Because like I can do a lot to mess with you if you give me that power, if I have the wrong intentions, or I'm unclear on my own stuff. And so I think the powerful, like I want to be like, hey, listeners, highlight is everything you said is something I can dial with my own compass, my own gut check with the questions I'm asking. It's not relying on everyone else. So as we're running out of time here, the on the spot question I want to ask is, Brannon, you're laying in a street, you just got hit by a car, and I'm like, Brannon, no! And it's like historic movie moment. I'm like, Brannon, what's the one thing that men need to know about recovery? The thing you say in your gasping breath is,
it's just all about love. Like, love yourself. Like, know that you're loved. It's already there. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove it. It is in you already, and just know that. That's what I would want them to know.
Love that. Tyler, a stampede of llamas runs you over and there's bruising and your body's maimed and you're there, and in the final seconds I'm like, Tyler, is you there? Someone wants to know, what do the betrayed partners need to know? What's the one thing? And in your gasping breath you say,
I say wrestle with God and accept whatever he tells you you are.
Well said. Well said, brothers who do therapy. Well said.
Hey, thanks for having us on, guys.
Dude, no, you guys are awesome. In the show notes where to find you guys, we're going to include that and put that in there. These are great guys. What I'd say about them, we've had the off-point conversation, but James and I and a lot of team, we get a lot of questions of like, hey, this program, this thing, would you do it or whatever? And I've told these guys before, but they're on my for real list. And James knows this, and Jason knows, because people ask me, they're like, what's their deal? And I always just say, that's my statement. I'm like, oh no, yeah, they're for real.
They're for real.
That's for real. So the retreat, they're different
hey,
programs.
likewise,
feelings are mutual,
right,
Stephen.
Right. So Therapy Utah, right, and it's Love Strong, right, is the other program you're doing. Remember, right? So we'll put it in the show notes. You can look that up, right? And so they're on the for real list. So some killer resources between these two brothers and what they're doing. The podcast is awesome as well. So invite you to lean into all of that. So follow us on social media at Unashamed and Afraid. If you know of a good resource, an expert, or you got a story, reach out to us. So reach out to us, email any of us, our names at Unashamed and Unafraid. We'd love to hear your story, for you to prop that therapist that changed your life, or retreat or resource. We want to know about it. And if you need a scholarship to stuff, let us know. Come on to the website. And if you want to help us with this movement, go ahead and donate at Unashamed and Afraid. Become an outsider. Those who are helping us with this movement are bold, accepted, and unashamed. So Therapy Brothers, thank you so much for being with us. You guys are awesome. Until we can all hang out again, invite everyone to continue to be unashamed.